Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 100.
Ben, we're still friends after talking to each other at least 100 times. That's amazing.
Yeah. And since we average about 2 hours an episode, that's over 200 hours that we've talked on this recording, and we're still talking.
That's crazy. I don't think I've talked to my parents that much.
We've been doing this for almost 4 years now.
Oh, this looking back on all this nostalgia, just episode 100, it just makes me so happy. I actually went through all of the show notes and tried to tally up, because we always say we're a podcast about games, life, and other things, but what do we actually talk about? We haven't tracked any of that. So
I'm really excited to hear what you're about to say.
So I broke it down into categories, and I have 10 categories that are very broad about the kind of stuff that we talk about, okay?
Okay, so if you're a recent listener joining this show, Josh is going to tell you what you can expect if you go back and listen to our back catalog.
Oof, I don't know. Like there's some episodes that are worth listening to. Other ones, I mean, they're early on. I mean, we didn't really find our voice until the Italian.
We didn't find our voice, 9. Yes.
Sorry. So the number one thing that we talk about is this very broad category that I've called life, and this is things that are happening in the world that we just want to talk about. Okay, and that is 24 of our previous 99 episodes.
Wow,
that's the number one.
That was the predominant.
Yeah, that's the number one thing that we talk about. That's right.
Okay.
The second, and I don't. We need to tone this one down. But the second category is our stories, where you or I or both of us are talking about stuff that we have firsthand experience with, or that we're regaling our listeners with tales of our daring do. And that's 21 episodes.
Okay.
Then after that, it's fiction. So this is specifically fiction, like works of literature. So like books, comic books, that kind of thing. And that was 14 episodes on fiction.
Okay.
There's 9 episodes on nonfiction. There's 8 episodes on movies, 6 episodes about TV, and only 5 episodes about Star Wars. Like, we talk about Star Wars every single episode, but only 5 episodes are actually dedicated to talking about Star Wars.
And this one's not going to be an exception. In fact, we've already done it. So, congratulations.
Check the box. Like, listeners, a little look into the background. We have a checkbox of things that we want to do on every episode. One of them is spoil a Star Wars movie. Another one is a shameless plug for sponsorship from somebody that would never, ever consider sponsoring us. And then another one is me being sarcastic and or handsome. So we check that off every time.
Yes.
4 episodes on Magic the Gathering, which, I mean, this podcast is called Bad at Magic, and we talked about Magic 4 times.
Well, that was in the title of the episode. There's no way we've only talked about Magic 4 times.
Well, we've talked. It goes back to these stats are about the main segments that we did. So we probably talked about Magic a whole lot, but we never had an episode about Magic. We had 4 episodes about Magic the Gathering as a main topic. Gaming, we talked about just gaming in general 4 times. Parenting, like a dedicated parenting episode was only 3 times. And we've only ever had 1 episode dedicated to music, and that was the music recap that happened last year.
Okay. Well, when I begin the show by saying welcome to the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things, I think we've been true to our tagline that we came up with very early on in the inception of the show.
Yeah, a more perfectly accurate tagline would be a podcast about life, our life, and things that aren't real.
Okay. Well, is that it, or do you got something about the number 100?
No. The number 100 isn't interesting. People want to be like, "Ooh, the number 100." People have been waiting with bated breath for me to go off about number 100. People, it's just a rollover to the 3rd digit in a base 10 system. Like, it's not that big a deal. Probably awesome. The most interesting thing that I read about the number 100 researching for this episode was 100. We use 100% to break down, things, like use percentages, and 100 is the full. Well, it's percent. The word percent literally is per cent, and the cent is the Latin root for 100. So it's like whatever percent. If you say 25%, you're literally saying 25 out of 100.
Okay. Well, speaking of even number multiples in a base 10 system, the last time you and I talked on this show about the upcoming release of a Lord of the Rings themed Magic the Gathering set, there was a bounty out on the serialized one-of-one card representing the One Ring that was $100,000. Josh, the set still hasn't been released, and the bounty is now up to $1 million.
Yes, there is some collector out in the world that if you open the one-of-one ring, he will write you a check for $1 million cash. So, Ben, this tells me two things about now. Like we talked a little bit about this in the bonus episode we did a while back. But one, if you buy any of the products, and there's only a couple of premium products that this thing could possibly be packaged in. Listeners, if you buy any of this product, do not open it in public. Because of the tiny chance that you get the one-of-one ring, everybody knows it's worth at least $1 million and probably more. Like, I know you have friends and I know the people at your local game store are good guys, but look around that store and really look. Is there somebody in there that would kill you for $1 million? The answer is probably yes.
What?
And then second, if you go home with your premium product, open the one-of-one ring, don't tell anyone. Like, do all of your interaction with selling the thing online as anonymously as possible, because again, it's just going to put a target on your back.
That's weird, because earlier you said you should record yourself opening it, and you seem to have different motivation for saying that.
So yeah, when I said that in our bonus episode facetiously, I said, if you open the one-of-one ring, please post it on social media so everybody in the world knows it's been opened and people stop opening all of the premium product.
That's what it was.
I didn't want Wizards of the Coast to make $3 billion. It was to
end the Willy Wonka, like, rummaging through Wonka bars to find the golden ticket.
I wanted Post Malone to send home all of his sweatshop workers that were just cracking collector booster packs trying to get the one-of-one ring. But now I'm changing that tune to one, like, that was when it was $100,000. That was just like, dude, that's awesome. I'm so happy for you. Now it's $1 million. It's like, dude, that's so awesome. When are you walking out to your car?
Okay, so here's the thing about what's happening now, Josh. Wizards of the Coast has effectively printed what is at least a $1 million bill and could potentially be more. And do you know why governments don't print $1 million bills?
Inflation, I assume.
Well, yeah, some governments do print $1 million bills, but I mean, at the current value of the US dollar, no one prints a $1 million bill because the opportunity cost of counterfeiting becomes so high.
That makes sense.
I can put a lot of effort into making a really, really, really good copy of $1 million bill and have it be worth it. But if I put a lot of effort into making a really, really, really good $1 bill, I'll lose on my investment.
Okay.
So when you make a Magic card, that's pretty well known. Like, there's high-resolution photos of it out there. We know what the back of a Magic card looks like. We know what the front of a Magic card looks like. There's the potential out there for someone to just try to print this and run it off as the legitimate real thing and try to get, if not that money, then some money.
There is a legitimate.
This is not a hypothetical.
No, it's not.
I'll put a photo in the podcast. There's a photo out there on the internet of someone holding what looks like 7 of these things.
Nice. I haven't seen that photo, but that's exactly what happened. There is already an underground counterfeiting ring for people printing the high value Magic the Gathering cards and trying to sell them to collectors. This is already a thing that happens. This is just going to expand the number of people that are trying to do it.
And that actually happened in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, too. There was a false alarm for the 7th ticket because someone counterfeited one, but somehow they had a way of verifying that it was true. And you mentioned this, and I think wisely, like, I wonder if there's some hidden feature of this card that will allow someone to know if it's the real one or not. There must be. Yeah. There must be microscopic text or just something that is a secret.
Yeah, counterfeiting. Is that like what if your prefix of a word is counter? Like, isn't there supposed to be a?
I don't think that's a double negative. I think that has a legitimate meaning.
Well, I think counterfeiting. I think they cancel out, and so I'm just going to say fitting. So there are technologies behind fitting these kinds of things. Like, checks have been around forever, money's been around forever. There are ways to make these things work. Now, my proposed solution to this problem on our bonus episode was they actually shouldn't put the card in a pack. They really shouldn't. That's a danger to everyone. They should put like a QR code on a card in a pack, and you should be able to scan it and then get with Wizards to actually do the handoff somewhere.
So that's what they do with valuable things that are included. Like when you, I don't know, had a thing in a cereal box that was supposed to be redeemable for something valuable, but that's because they couldn't fit it in the cereal box. It was never the thing itself that was valuable, but now it can fit in a pack. So
yeah, but
why not?
Because it's too dangerous.
The joy is opening the actual thing.
It's too dangerous. Like some cop somewhere. Like I'm imagining the opening to like an NCIS or a CSI show where a cop is walking in on this game store that's police taped off, and it's just a mound of corpses, and the top corpse has the one-of-one ring in its hand on the pile of dead bodies.
That's funny that you say that, Josh, but when you talk about not opening it in your local game store and saying potentially there's one person in the room that would kill you for it, I cannot even fathom what you're talking about. I would feel so safe opening this in my local game store.
And you shouldn't. That is a false sense of security because, yeah, I'm being facetious and I'm over-exaggerating when I say somebody in there would kill you for $1 million. That's a very high bar. There's very few people that would actually kill another human being for $1 million. But Ben,
maybe they would follow me home and wait for me to leave and break into my house and look for it. I could see that.
It's also a lower bar to follow you to the parking lot, beat the snot out of you, and take your trade binder.
Yeah, but then you know who took it.
Do you? Do you though? I mean, there's ways around that.
There's a thing when it's a one of like, yeah. There's witnesses in a trail.
Is that what some 19-year-old kid who's down on his luck playing Magic at his local game store is thinking about when he sees the one-of-one ring opened and the guy two seats down from him?
I don't know. I don't want to put anything below humans, but I just don't see how it would play out like you say.
Just universe bias, man. Like terrible things happen for much less reason than that.
Yeah, but people are mostly rational.
Mostly. I'm talking about the 2%, the tail edge here.
All right. Well, listeners, if you open up the One Ring, I want to see a photo.
Listeners, if you open the one-of-one ring, I want to see a photo of it after you've already safely disposed of it.
I'd be tempted to hang on to it. I can tell you feel like it's just too hot. Like, doesn't it seem like the price would only go up? Like, why not hang on to it?
Because if I
own it for a little while.
Because if I sell it right now, after I pay the taxes, I could pay off my house. That's like giving me a $2,000 a month pay raise, Ben.
I see. So the opportunity cost of having it is not having the $1 million right now.
Yeah, like the opportunity cost is in the dollars that somebody's willing to give you for it.
Yes, but if in a year somebody's going to offer me $2 million for it, you're saying the cost of not having that $1 million for a year is worth $1 million?
You're talking to an accountant. I could calculate what the cost is because obviously you take the $1 million now, you invest it into no-risk government bonds at the prevailing interest rate, and then you accrue compounding interest for the amount of time between now and then. That's how you can actually calculate how much the money is worth now versus.
But it's not going to double. As we discussed on past episodes of the podcast, the deadline has passed for me to deploy to the Middle East, probably for the last time in my military career, and I am coming to you now from the Middle East.
From an undisclosed classified location. Listeners, don't even ask.
An undisclosed location in Southwest Asia. This isn't about it being classified. It's about what I think it's about is operational security, and two, about courtesies to our host nation. Who there's a little bit of sensitivity under Middle Eastern countries that host U.S. bases about their presence and tolerance of the Americans.
I think it's just cooler to say I can't tell you where I'm calling from.
Yeah, so I'm in the Middle East now. Josh, I gotta say, deploying one time right at the end of my career just feels kind of intolerable in enduring this one last round of indignities.
Didn't you volunteer to suffer these indignities?
I did, but anything you volunteer for, sometimes there's that little moment of chagrin where you go, oh yeah, I forgot all of this. And
every woman that has had more than one kid, every woman that's had more than one child just sympathized with you super hard and told you to shut up.
Yeah. So there's this last round of indignities that I'm going through, and for some reason the Air Force has upped the ante on like every one of them. Like I didn't just go back and have my immunizations. It's like they come up with 2 new ones that have never been existed before. It wasn't like I just had to do a checklist. It's like I had to do 3 extras and they were redundant, and no one would accept the fact that the other people had the items on their checklist too. It was just more. I have unused equipment that I had to be issued. I had unnecessary training I had to fulfill. I had waste time. I'm like, for instance, my base sent me to Virginia to catch my plane that would fly me over here 52 hours early.
I love that.
Do you know what happened during
hours?
Do you know what happened during those 52 hours? My grandmother's funeral.
Yeah, we talked about that in the previous episode, and I know you're super bad at missing that.
But I didn't know the specifics during that episode. Now I know that like I could have made it to the funeral, but no, the Air Force just didn't. Whatever.
From the Air Force's perspective, it's an unacceptable risk that you get delayed in your flight back and miss your rotator going to the Middle East, man. You know the answer to these questions.
I know. It's like between the last time I did this and now, enough people have done stupid things that they've raised the bar. They put the bar even lower.
Yeah, they have to. The bar is set for the lowest common denominator. And that's not you who's got your stuff together and is good at planning. It's for Airman Snuffy over here who's fresh out of high school, has never washed his own clothes before. He has to be told every step that he takes or he'll screw it all up.
Every time one of those screw-ups happens, there's this potential for this event. People are familiar with this in the abstract, and that is some of the military does something stupid, and technically they're kind of doing it on behalf of the American people. And so if it's of significant enough effect that it catches the public attention, then people say, why did this happen? How can we prevent it from happening again? What are you doing, Congressman? And then the congressman says, what are you doing, General? And then something happens.
Well, and here's the thing.
And
this happens all the time in everywhere, not just in the military, in civilian life too. And the difference is, though, in civilian life, when something goes wrong and you go after and you look at it like, okay, what happened? What actually went wrong? If the answer is, oh, that guy's just an idiot, that's an acceptable answer. Like there's a threshold that has to be met before you start tweaking the process. But in the military, that answer is never acceptable. It's never acceptable.
Right. Why is he an idiot? What are you doing to make sure he's not an idiot next time?
When a general is being interviewed by a congressman on C-SPAN, like the general saying, well, that kid is just stupid and that's why he got shot. That's not something he's allowed to say.
That's why he posted top secret documents on his Discord server.
Yeah. Like we have robust, redundant processes in place to prevent this from happening, and he circumvented all of them willfully. Like, yeah, we're trying to stop spies, but he wasn't a spy. He was a kid that had the clearance to get all the stuff that we, like...
He was just trying to impress his idiot friends.
If there was a way to perfectly prevent secret information from getting out, we would do that, but there isn't, so it does. Like, that's not the explanation the general can give to the congressman.
No, you're right. So that one of the things that turns into is this logical fallacy that when something goes wrong, it's because of a lack of training.
No, I don't think that's the perception. I think that's just the easy solution. We need to change something so we can tell everybody that we changed something. The easiest thing is to slap another hour's worth of computer-based training on everyone.
Yeah, so there's firearms qualification training and self-aid and buddy care training and chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear response training, survive, evade, resist training, religious sensitivity training, finance training, cultural awareness training, suicide and violence awareness training, and on and on and on and on and on. And before you deploy, you have to prove that you've done all of that. So that was what my life was for like the last couple of months.
My favorite instructor that I ever had for the chemical, nuclear, biological warfare training, it's a whole day thing, and he stands up at the front of the class at the beginning. He's like, all right, here's all of your equipment. Now, to be fair, if you are actually hit with any of these agents out in the field, you're probably toast. But there's a small chance that some of this might protect you, and so that's what this training is about.
I love that guy by proxy. Whoever you are, guy that said that, I love you. I hope he's a listener to this podcast. But for all that stuff, and then there's all the equipment, this stuff that I'm not going to need. Oh, there's also some cool things they do that you probably didn't know about. Like, for instance, you have to provide them a sample of your DNA so that if your body is so mangled and unrecognizable, they still have a way to identify your remains. Another thing they do is they prepare you for if you're potentially taken prisoner in some type of clandestine way where you could potentially not know whether the people that are rescuing you are good guys or bad guys. So they give you this secret interview where they're asking you the kind of questions like the backup questions to unlock your bank account.
Yep.
That only you and them know the answer to. And then if they're asking you those questions or passing you those questions in code, then you know it's the good guys or the bad guys got into that database.
So I actually got that training too, and I got it from a guy that was one of the people that was going to be in the chopper to come rescue you clandestinely. He said, all right, here's what's going to happen is we're going to get off the helicopter and we're going to approach you with guns drawn because we don't know if you're a bad guy, like the person that's on the ground, like evading capture. And so I'm going to put you into a headlock, and I'm going to point a gun at your head and I'm going to ask you these secret questions. And if you get it wrong, I'm probably going to thump you once, and I'm going to ask you again. And if you get it wrong again, all that means is I'm going to hog tie you to the point where you can't move and then carry you to the helicopter. And I'm just going to treat you as a threat until we can get you back to base and figure out if you are a threat or not.
Yeah. Wow, that was a great description of that. I went through that once, Josh. Have I ever told you the story about when I was a hostage?
Wait. This is episode 100. You have, you were an Italian auto parts smuggler. You have been, you're a licensed liquor importer in the state of New Jersey. How many weird things can you be that I'm not aware of, Ben?
Okay, so let me tell you this story. So everyone knows what to expect in basic training, right? You go to basic training and they dress you up in a uniform and they tell you look like a dump and they make you polish your boots and they march you around and they make you make your bed real neat and they wake you up at all hours of the day and night and basically just try to break you down so that they can get you used to following orders and paying attention to detail, right?
Yep.
So we thought we knew everything that was happening and we were getting towards the end of our basic training experience where they let the pressure cooker open up a little bit because they don't want to just send you back out into the real military coming straight out of the pressure cooker because you'll do it wrong. So they back off a little bit and say, okay, now that we've taught you to be military, now just chill a bit and now go to do your jobs. And we would gotten to that phase. And one night at 10 p.m., they come down the hallway and knock on our doors and tell us to get dressed in our civilian clothes that we would wear to go off base, which still looks like a uniform. It's khaki pants and a shirt with the logo of the basic training on it. I've never told you the story.
You've never told me. No, you never told me the story where you were a hostage.
So we didn't know what on earth was going on. It just was really unexpected. We thought we'd gotten through all of this, come by in the middle of the night and tell us stuff we didn't expect stuff. So we do as we're told. We put on our clothes and we go out and they march us outside, put us on a bus, and drive down to the flight line. And there's an idling 767 there.
Okay.
I can't tell you how unexpected this is, Josh. Like when you're in basic training, you're not expecting to get on a plane for any reason.
Yeah. So
they put us on the plane, sit us down, close the door, and start taxiing, and flight attendants come out.
Okay, now I'm starting to remember you telling me this story. Yes, they didn't tell you the specifics, but you were pretend hostages for a training exercise for some other organization.
Yeah, basically the colonel who was in charge of our training school had a friend who needed a plane full of semi-willing hostages who had nothing better to do an exercise about what if a plane were hijacked post-September 11th.
That's awesome.
And so this plane took off from where we were in Alabama, and it was just a regular flight crew. So the flight attendants came out and started bringing us service, like drinks and meals and turn on a movie and stuff. That's so out of character for what our life had been like up to that point in basic training. And we take off into the air, and the flight's a couple of hours, and we're like, where are we going? And the TVs on the back of the seat show a map of where we're flying, and we're out over the Gulf of Mexico. And then the island of Puerto Rico starts zooming in, and we start getting closer and closer to Puerto Rico. And then some guys come out from the front and tell us that we are about to participate in an exercise where we're going to be hostages on a hijacked airplane. And then they start handing out what's called moulage. Moulage is makeup designed to represent an injury that's supposed to be treated as if it were real in an exercise scenario. So you've been here, you're bleeding and you have a cut arm or whatever, and handing this out and giving us instructions. and then they land us on this island in Puerto Rico, and then special forces storm the plane. I'm probably not supposed to talk about the specifics of everything they do, but they had night vision gear on, they had dogs, they had guns, it was insane. And then they took us all off and lined us up on the runway and did exactly like you said. They had to treat every single occupant of the plane as if they were potentially a terrorist.
Yeah, because they don't know. The best part of your story, this whole thing, is like you're on this plane and you're halfway to your destination. That's when they come out and it's like, okay, this is a training exercise. You all are going to pretend to be hostages. I can imagine somebody in the plane raising their hand going, we're kind of already hostages. Where are we going?
Yeah. So basically, because of the flight requirements, after the plane had landed and they'd done the exercise, the aircrew needed time to turn around, and so they couldn't just put us back on the plane and fly us back. So they said, all right, go down to the enlisted club. It's not like they didn't have billeting for us. They're just like, and they could treat us like crap because we're in basic training. So like, go down the enlisted club, find a piece of floor, and see if you can get a few hours sleep, and we'll wake you up when it's time to fly back.
That's a great example of what it's like to be in the military. We just need bodies, and that's literally all you are. It's like, oh right, we have to feed you, and you need sleep. Well, try to get some food and sleep, and then come back and be here at this time.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And don't you be late. So we came back and we weren't late, but we woke up and somebody had set out like a catered breakfast with like fresh fruit. And I grabbed a cup of pineapple and I walked out on the veranda and looked down over the palm trees at the ocean and thought, I can't believe I'm doing this while I'm in basic training.
This is all right. That kind of moment right there. Like that's so quintessentially Ben Rich. Is everybody else is like just so wasted from the weird like experience that they just had and trying to get some rack time. Here's Ben standing on the veranda, looking at the sun rising, eating a couple of pineapple. Just what a glorious day.
Oh man, it was. And then they flew us back to basic training and back to real life. But that was the time I was a hostage.
That was the time Ben was a hostage.
All right, Josh, it's time for bad at parenting.
Okay. Yes. So, God, I don't know if this is bad at parenting. I just threw this in as at our generic bad of area. Okay.
Okay.
So, Ben, the question that I posed in this: are pants really necessary anyway? Here's what happened. Last weekend, I took my family. We all went out and we saw the new Spider-Man movie, Across the Spider-Verse, whatever it's called.
Across the Spider-Verse.
Across the Spider-Verse. That's fantastic. We should talk about that at some point, with no spoilers.
Yes, you and I both want to talk about it really bad. We'll talk about it in episode 101.
Okay. Well, that's neither here nor there. It's just this. I'm setting in the stage. This is what happened. I took my whole family out. We went to the movies. From the movies, we came home, but I had a couple of errands to run. So I had to run to Home Depot and get some household stuff because one of the vent fans in the bathroom. You know, your standard homeowner nonsense. Like, I need to get $20 worth of stuff at Home Depot to do this minor repair myself. Oh, on the way home from Home Depot, I'll stop by the grocery store and grab these handful of things that we need. And then I came home, and that's when I noticed that the back of my pants had split from my belt to like below my thigh on the back. Like, it was enormous. Like, I have a picture of it. It is at least 12 full inches of my pants were just completely ripped apart.
Were you wearing like cartoon print boxer shorts?
No,
like Skeletor.
This is what's lucky for me is I was actually wearing gray shorts and I was wearing gray boxer briefs underneath. So like they were very well blended together. But I immediately went to my wife and I said,
"Did you gain too much weight? Are you an old man that?" Keeps his pants too long?
No, stop it. Like, okay, so this is in this a little slice of my life. There's a big shelf that I have been given by my wife because it is above 6 feet in the air and she can't reach it, and that's where all my pants live. Okay, this shelf had accumulated way too many pants. And so the weekend previous, I had to go. I went through all of the pants that I own to see which ones still fit and which ones don't, and I donated all the ones that don't. And so I severely cut down on the number because I was under the impression that I was running out of shorts because there's only like 3 pairs I could find. Turns out I actually have a ton of shorts that fit, and I have a whole big old stack.
They were up there on the shelf.
They were up there on the shelf, buried in with everything else. But so then I started cycling. I'm like, I've got all these pants that fit. I should not be wearing the same 3 pairs over and over again. And so I grabbed this pair, which was at like the bottom of the pile for who knows how long. And like they're just super old, I guess, or a moth got to them or something, because they split from the freaking belt line down to almost the hem of the pant leg.
How long was it before you were able to get home and change?
Well, I didn't notice until I got home, Ben. I went to the movies, I went to Home Depot, I went to the grocery store, and I didn't notice until I got back from running all these errands, completely oblivious to the fact that I'm basically not wearing pants.
You weren't even like Tom on Tom and Jerry when like his tail was on fire. He was like, "Oh, something's cooking." you were like, "There's a draft" or nothing.
At one point,
you didn't,
I don't remember.
Think back and.
At one point, I don't remember when specifically. I remember getting into my car and feeling a very slight popping, like, feel from my.
Oh, you don't
my
know when it happened.
Like it happened at some point throughout the day when I was out. But I remember feeling that and going, "Oh, that was odd," and then immediately dismissing it and going on with what I was doing.
Okay, so I titled this segment wrong. What is it bad at? Bad at laundry?
Bad at conforming with societal expectations of covering your nude parts? Like, I don't know. Like,
except that you're wearing the same color underwear as your pants, so probably no one noticed.
So that's the thing I started asking. Like, well, if I was walking around in my underwear, would anybody say anything? Would anybody give me guff? Like, I've seen women go to the grocery store in bikinis with like a sarong wrap around their waist. Like, is that not good enough? Like, but like, so a woman wearing a tiny bikini going into a store is like, oh, she's wearing a bathing suit. A woman walking into a store wearing a bra with no shirt. Well, hang on a second. No, but if it's a sports bra, that's acceptable now. So where are these lines?
Yeah, even? Some of them are contextual. You know, like. Bikini, some lingerie is indistinguishable from a bikini, but you put both on the beach and it's not a big deal.
I'm not allowed to go into a store without a shirt on, but if I put a bikini top on, is that okay?
Oh, why did you give me that mental image?
You're welcome.
Okay, so what are you proposing? Okay, here's the thing. I got here to the Middle East and I decided to just stay within the requirements of my medical waiver that allows me to grow a beard, but not say anything to anyone. And since I left home, I've met 100 new military people at least. And I expected by now at least one soul would have said a single word to me, and not one has. No one.
Nobody. And how often do you get challenged on that back at home station?
I don't know. I've been on this profile my whole career, and early on I used to get challenged on it all the time, but it feels like this is an outward example of the fact that our culture has changed. Beards have become more acceptable over the last 20 years. Wouldn't you say that's true?
Oh, absolutely. Beards are in. Beards have been in for like 10 years now, man.
Right, exactly. So that 10 years, I think, was enough to prep the military that now people, that even if there are people inside the military that have sour grapes about it, they're not going to say anything to me.
The first thing I did when I got out of the military was grow a beard.
It is for most, I think. I wonder how many don't.
How many people don't grow a beard? My brother didn't grow a beard. Refuses to grow a beard.
Those are the guys that get forced out at 30 years.
I don't want to shave ever.
Did you have anything else to say about pants? You're against pants?
I mean, I have a picture of my giant split in my pants while I'm not wearing them, just to demonstrate like how bad it really was.
Link in the show notes.
Link in the show notes. Well, maybe we'll see. Like, it's pretty bad.
All right. Well, we will talk about Spider-Man at some later time. For now, it is time for Bad at Rhetoric. So, last time in Bad at Rhetoric, I introduced the canons of rhetoric. There's 5 of them: invention, arrangement, style, memory, and delivery. First time I talked about invention. Today I'm going to talk about arrangement. Arrangement means how do you organize what it is you're going to say in your writing or speech. Cicero classified what he called a classical oration that consists, and you recognize this because it still exists today. You have an introduction, then you have your speech, and then you have a conclusion. In the Ciceroian, is that a word? In the Ciceroian version of a classical oration, there's the exordium, which is where you establish your authority or appeal to ethos. Then your oration, where you state your facts, divide it into segments, give proof and refutation, and then your conclusion, where you employ emotional appeals. So a classical oration contains ethos, pathos, and logos.
I see. So you hook them with the ethics. Like, this is something that we should do. I'm appealing to your higher logic brains or whatever. And then you give them the reasons in a very logical way. But at the end, you've got to give them that emotional. You got to pull them in with, like, get them actually committed by appealing to their emotional sense of urgency or whatever.
You got it. But that's one example of arrangement. Any arrangement is like how you organize your thoughts in your rhetoric. But that's a classical oration as defined by Cicero. For what I'm reading right now, Josh, one of the things about traveling like this, and especially having 52 hours where I'm sitting around doing nothing thanks to the U.S. government, I had plenty of time to read. So I finished a couple of books this week that had kind of just been languishing. Wait, languishing? Like, do you not finish books before starting a new one? Don't you have a pile of books on your nightstand?
I mean, I have piles of books, yes, but I finish one before I start another one.
You only read one at a time, huh? I have. Sometimes I'll start. I'm not starting like multiple involved epic fantasies, but sometimes I'll start a nonfiction book and a fiction book, and that kind of thing. So I had a pile of like, I had like a pile of, and I also do like scripture study, and that, of course, I'm not going to like read the Bible in its entirety before
you already mentioned fiction, Ben.
Book. Stop. And I have a pile of books. Anyway, while I was in New York City a couple of weeks ago, as it's documented on the podcast, I went into a bookstore and we were just looking around, and this book caught my eye. The cover of it looks like a ruler, and it's called 20 Minutes in Manhattan. I don't know why it grasped me. I picked it up and I bought it and I brought it home, and it was a book by an architect who works in New York City, and he talked about his daily pedestrian commute from his home in Greenwich Village to his office in Soho. And that's where we stayed while we were there. And it's fascinating that this book, most of it was about the exact location where I was when I was in Manhattan. So it was like it was the college version, 404 course on where I was at. And when I say where I was at, I mean, this is an architect talking about why the buildings around here are this high, or, how the subways got built, or why the streets are oriented the direction that they are. And I enjoyed the heck out of it. It was just a book about like architecture and society and stuff, and it was fantastic.
All right, so
20 Minutes in Manhattan by Michael Sorkin.
Okay, so this sounds really stupid, but that was like the best like back cover description of that book that you could have given me, because you're talking to a person that has watched multiple videos about the height zoning requirements for skyscrapers in Manhattan.
Okay, I'll send you the book if you want. It's pretty good.
Don't in the mail. You're in an undisclosed location on the other side of the earth. I don't want you spending hundreds of dollars shipping me stuff. Just wait until we see each other.
I also have access to an overseas post office, so it gets treated as if I lived one town over from you in America.
That's kind of.
I just have to fill out a customs form.
We're going to talk about that later too. This virtual distance that exists between us, because like the world is flat and all that stuff. But anyway, that's the one book you're reading. What's the other book?
So I finished that book, and then I picked up another book that was in my queue. It's called A Walk in My Shoes by Ben Schialti. The subtitle is Questions I'm Often Asked as a Gay Latter-day Saint. So that's the other book that I'm reading.
I didn't know you could be a gay Latter-day Saint.
Yeah, well, that's probably one of the questions that he's asked. I haven't gotten that far yet.
Fair enough. I am currently reading the third book of the Dresden Files. Yeah, I read 2 books in the time that between recording podcasts.
Well, yeah, now that you're not working Saturdays anymore.
Oh yeah, and these things they're like candy bars. I'm just eating them up. I know they're bad for me, but I just can't stop. This is the third book in the Dresden Files series by Jim Butcher. The premise is that this guy is in pseudo-modern times like the aughts. He is a wizard. Supernatural stuff exists, but nobody believes in it, and it's kind of happening in the background. And he gets called in for, it's a random, like it's like a mystery story kind of set up like a noir story. So you're kind of solving the mystery with him as the book goes along. The last one I just read, it opened with him like going to a crime scene that he was called in to consult on by one of the cops that knows him, because this person was torn to pieces and he found werewolf prints there. So the whole book was about who's the werewolf killer, which was, again, it's not good for you, but 2 thumbs up.
Set
this
in
is great.
Contemporary modern world, like it's just our world, Chicago,
yes. Mm-hmm.
current year.
That's right.
I mentioned that you were reading this series, and my wife goes, "Oh yeah, the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. I've read them all twice." I'm like, "Oh, more proof that I'm married to the female version of Josh."
The more I learn about your wife, Ben, the nicer that you should treat her. Like, be nice to her. She's a great person.
Uh-huh.
Are you not aware? How are you not aware of the kinds of books that your wife reads? Bad at husbanding. Here, we're transitioning.
All right, good. What do I say about this? My wife is a voracious consumer of fictional media. For instance, she loves sewing and quilting and cross-stitching, and she'll just put on, like, audiobooks on Serial and just sit there and work with her hands while she's doing that, like, all day.
That's awesome. Like, that's the way audiobooks can make your life better, listeners. If you're doing something that doesn't require a ton of your frontal lobe, like, listen to audiobooks. It's great.
Yeah. So I had no idea she'd even read a single... Another thing is, I think she recognizes that our tastes are different enough that frequently we don't enjoy discussions about these kinds of things. So she'll read an entire series like the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher and just, I don't know, decide I don't want to hear about it, so she doesn't talk to me about it. So I didn't know she'd read it. That's
interesting because my wife is currently reading. She's been picking up a lot of books about in the same kind of genre about mindfulness and like Buddhism. Like a lot of them were written by this Buddhist monk, and it's like she shows me passages, and it's really interesting. Those are in my queue to read after I'm done with the Dresden Files. But her reading something that's like so good for her and like gonna like make her like hopefully like expand her awareness of things just in the real world. That me trying to describe to her the werewolf mystery murder that I just read is it makes me feel like a little kid showing my picture to my parents.
Okay, it's interesting though that your response is, okay, I'll try that too and I'll read it, because frequently when Alicia describes to me the books that she's reading, I think I'm not really interested in reading that. And when I try to talk to her about like this book I'm reading about the architecture in New York City, she gets the same look on her face that I think I get when she starts talking to me about the latest fiction book that she's reading. I mean, I just listed off to you 2 nonfiction books and you read a fiction book.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's our bread and butter. You are the nonfiction guy. You want to consume nonfiction. And for some reason, you can't enjoy fiction without looking straight through it to the code of the Matrix. And so you don't get immersed into the fiction, the storytelling the same way that I do.
Yeah, that's
my
probably
wife,
true.
My wife does the same thing. Like, I love the Wheel of Time so much that I actually strong-armed her, or she recognized that it was so important to me that she read the entire Wheel of Time series. My wife did. Okay, Ben? Mm-hmm. But she then told me how she got through it so quickly was because there was some passages where she would just skip whole pages. She's like, oh, okay, I kind of know what's going on, and then just flip.
Did that offend your inner story consumer?
You have no idea. It's like what? Like, yeah, it's like you consume this thing with me. It's like, oh, I want you to watch this movie. It's super important and impactful to me in my life, and I think you'll really enjoy it. Okay, great. And then you sit down and you're on your phone the entire time. Like, you did the thing, but did you do the thing?
I think that's why I enjoyed another major motion picture masterpiece by Tom Hanks, because it was fiction, but it felt like nonfiction. Like it was just about making a movie. That's why my favorite fiction author is John Grisham. I love reading his books. Yeah, they're fictional murder mysteries or legal thrillers or whatever, but I feel like I'm learning about what it's like to be a lawyer.
We're making progress here. So there is a specific subgenre of fiction that's not necessarily set in contemporary times, but is non-fiction-esque. What is it, like historical fictions? Have you read any historical fictions where everything is historically accurate, but the story of the specific characters is made up?
I can't think of one off the top of my head. Can you think of one I might have known about?
Probably not. My wife had me read this series that she read that she really enjoyed, and I read it, and I actually really enjoyed it too. It's a historical fiction set in different periods in American history, and it's about specific characters, but they're just involved in the things that are happening in the world that were going on at that time. Like one of the main characters gets drafted into World War I, and he's a nobleman, so he's like a second lieutenant or a captain or something.
Okay, yeah, I recently read that book that's by a German guy that was set in World War I that was called...
All Quiet on the Western Front.
All Quiet on the Western Front, and it was so well written that I thought it was nonfiction, but when I read about it after I was done, it turns out that it was fiction.
Well, there you go.
Historical fiction.
We just opened up an entire section of the bookstore for you, my friend. There's a whole world of people writing fictional stories that are set in, like, pick a time period that is historically accurate.
So I had something weird happen where I because of the algorithm on YouTube, I ended up watching a video by author Brandon McNulty. I'll put a link to one of his videos in the show notes, where he's basically just teaching a course on how to do good writing. And they're very attractive things to the layperson. It's like, what elements do you need to have a really delicious bad guy? And then he'll look at some examples in film and stories of great bad guys and talk about what makes them great bad guys. And so then that ended up in my feed, and I've watched maybe 15 of this guy's videos, and I just enjoy him every time, where he's analyzing elements of story and looking at bad examples and looking at good examples. And every time when he does one of these videos, he just gives a quick plug for his books, and they're fiction. He has a couple of books out. And then my Audible credit came up for the month, and I watched one of his videos. I'm like, fine, I'll try it. So next in my queue is Bad Parts by Brandon McNulty.
Cool. I'm interested in that. Put a link to his videos in the show notes. I want to watch some of his videos.
For our main segment today, Josh, you and I decided that we were going to do Bad at Magic Q&A number 3. This is only the third time that we've done this, where we farm out our content to our listeners and let them come up with ideas of what we're going to talk about.
That just sounds so lazy for our episode 100 special. Hey, listeners, we don't want to write anything. Why don't you go ahead and tell us what's
You went back and looked at every single episode up until now. That's awesome. We had some great questions from listeners UJO, Tweedle Beatles, Jim McGowan, some of our favorite regular listeners, as well as some others. So let's dive in and answer some of their questions. The first question is, what is each host's respective least favorite Magic card? If you see it across the table, you roll your eyes and sigh.
Oh, Ben. Like, I commented on this one in the Reddit when it came up, because there are so many where somebody will play it and be like, do I really want to continue with this game, or should I just pick up and go have fun somewhere else?
That's always an option. It's the fastest action in the rules in a game of Magic. It exceeds every other action.
A player may concede the game at any time. Yes.
Right.
I forget which actual rule that is, but there is a rule, and it says that specifically. You do not have to wait for priority to forfeit the game.
Right.
Do you want me to go first? Because, man, I've got a list.
How about you give one, and then I'll give one, and then when I run out, you can do the rest.
Okay, cool. So when I play weird formats now, because I'm not in that standard meta chase anymore. So these are going to be all over the place. The first one that drives me absolutely crazy is when I log on to Magic Arena, and I just want to play like their Commander-esque format. It's only 2 players. You start at 25 life, but it's still 100 cards. It's still singleton. You still have a commander.
What's it called?
It's called Historic Brawl.
Brawl.
Is what I'm playing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Commander, but not exactly Commander. It's as close as Magic Arena can get. Anyway, whenever I see my opponent has the commander Kinnan Bonder Prodigy, I just sigh heavily and like, well, this is gonna suck.
Why? What does he do?
He's blue-green, and whenever a non-land source is tapped for mana, you get 2 of that mana instead. So he's doubling all of your mana rocks and all of your
So he's a
dorks.
ramp card.
But then he says, pay 7 mana, look at the top, I think it's 7 cards of your library, and put a non-human card into play. So it's the first 3 turns of the game, he's going to ramp.
It's a ramp card that's a
atrociously.
slot machine. Why?
Yeah.
Why? That sounds like fun. What's your problem with that card?
Because it's a 2-drop. That's my problem with the card. It's like, basically I sit down like, okay, if I don't kill this 2-drop every turn for the next 5 turns, I'm going to lose, because he's going to flip over like a 14-14, and I'm just not going to be able to deal with it.
So this is an interesting thing that's happened in Magic, where Wizards of the Coast has printed these cards that are for Commander only, and they work in the Commander format, but they would never work in any other constructed format. And before Wizards supported the Commander format, those cards didn't exist. Like, they weren't out there. These overpowered corner case cards. Well,
exactly. And Kinnan, I don't know if it's in standard. I don't know if it ever was, but it feels like a Commander card.
I don't know. Maybe it was.
I'm gonna have to look up what study was in. Yeah, go ahead.
So the reason for that is basically I want to try to examine the underlying cause of what makes these cards unfun. So for that one, I think the cause would be that it does something that kind of makes the game really lopsided.
It's a card that if you don't answer it right now, you're going to fall so far behind that the game is going to be unwinnable. And you're going to keep trying to play, but you're not going to be able to.
So in Mark Rosewater's 7 things that every game needs, one of the things he says is a quote-unquote catch-up feature. So you're saying this is a card that basically puts the game so far out of reach that you can't catch up.
Well,
So it breaks the fundamental ability of the game to allow for someone to catch up.
I could catch up if my entire deck was nothing but board wipes after that point. Like that's the point, is that now if I'm not playing a specific strategy, I'm just there's no winning.
Okay. My first one is Sensei's Divining Top. Sensei's Divining Top seems kind of harmless. It's just this card that costs 1 mana, you put into play, and then you can pay 1 mana and look at the top 3 cards of your library and put them back in any order. But there's no limit to how many times you can do that, and it's just a card that inexplicably slows down the game. I think it got banned at one point just for that reason. Like, it just makes it so someone's always looking at the top cards of their library and sorting them around, and it just slows the game down, and it's annoying.
I remember when Sensei's Dividing Top was in Standard, and here's the thing, like when you're playing on a computer, it's very easy to be composed and remember exactly what the top 3 cards of your library are, because you could like write them down or something. But in paper, you forget all the time, and it's very common to have somebody top multiple times during the same turn looking at the same 3 cards because they can't remember what they were.
Jeez. Yeah, that's just annoying. So the reason behind mine is it just slows the game down and doesn't feel like it adds anything to the gameplay experience.
Yeah, okay. Makes sense. My next one, also Historic Brawl.
Also an artifact from Kamigawa Black. Oh. Man, that block was bad.
Yeah. So, Umezawa's Jitte. Ben, this was the first card that I bought singles of. This is the first card I went on the internet and I spent $60 in cash to buy 4 copies of it. It's a 2-drop artifact equipment that it's just insane. It's broken. It's very, very good.
You don't need to talk about all the abilities of it, but basically it does things that equipment shouldn't be able to do.
And it does all of the things. Like, it kills creatures, it kills your opponent, and it stops you from dying. Like, all wrapped up in one package that you can't really stop very well.
Yeah, it does. It breaks one of the fundamental rules. It's a flavor violation, maybe even a rules violation of equipment, and that is equipment, by definition, should only be able to evoke its abilities when a creature's holding it. But this particular piece of equipment doesn't have to be equipped to a creature to work.
Nope, creature just has to do damage. Then you kill the creature all day. I don't care. I've got charge counters on my Jitte. You're screwed. Like, it feels, if you're sitting on a table, even if they have no creatures, they got a Jitte with charge counters, you feel like you're behind.
Yep.
And the only reason I bought this card, not because I wanted to play it, I didn't. I hated the card. I did play it, and I did equip it to creatures, and I did swing, and I did win many games if it went unanswered.
Did you feel dirty?
Yes, because I didn't buy the Jitte to play as the Jitte.
Why did you buy it, Josh?
I bought it as the best Jitte removal in the format. Back then, when I was playing it in Standard, the Legend rules said, if 2 things that are legendary are on the table, you sacrifice both of them.
Right.
So when my opponent played Jitte, I could play my own Jitte, and both of them would blow up. So I had a 2 colorless removal spell for other Jittes.
You're right about it being the best artifact removal possible for that particular artifact. Because if you're holding artifact removal in your hand and they don't have an artifact, it's lost. But if you're holding a Jitte in your hand and they don't have a Jitte, it's excellent.
Yeah, you're going to win the game now. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. The second one on my list is Opposition. I didn't play Magic during the time that this card was in Standard, but it's in the Vintage Cube almost every rotation. And whenever my opponent plays it, I just roll my eyes and go and sigh, just like our listener asked. So for me, this one doesn't break any of the rules of the game, but it just sucks the fun out of the game because it turns it into this mini game where you're basically using it to tap your opponent's creatures and lands and prevent them from doing anything fun. No more casting spells, no more attacking for you.
Man, what's really funny about this is Opposition is one of my favorite cards to draft in the Vintage Cube. I love playing that card, so this just demonstrates our different play styles.
You're such a Dave sometimes, Josh. All right, what's third on your list?
Okay, I've been playing a lot of Commander in Paper lately, and I've come to despise this card. It's Avacyn, Angel of Hope. And it's like an 8-drop or something. Like, it's impossible to get into play, but once you get it into play, it says it is indestructible, and other creatures you control are indestructible.
Okay.
And like, you just want to sit there and like shrug at the whole table, like, well, if you don't have exile effects, I guess I'm gonna win eventually, and that's just what it feels like.
Yeah, I'm starting to see a theme with yours. They're these ones that kind of break the rules. For mine, they're just ones that like stretch out the game or make it unfun. But yours are the ones that like kind of change the fundamental rules of what makes a game fun.
I think the specifics of mine are if you play a card that if I have to fundamentally alter the way that I am playing the game or else I'm going to lose, that's what makes it unfun for me. I want to play my game. You want to play your game. Why do we have to interact with each other? That's terrible. Let's just each do our thing and see whose thing is better.
Yeah. Did the rest of yours have... Okay, so what's the next one?
Oh, so you did you run out already? Okay.
Yeah.
So next one, oh, I have so many. Invoke Despair, which is still in standard. It's
a card that actually does what its name says.
It is despair. Like you sacrifice a creature, an artifact, an enchantment, and a planeswalker, and if you can't, you lose 2 life and your opponent draws a card.
So I played against a mono black control deck in Modern this week, and I was running my deck that's full of enchantments and planeswalkers, and it was like a 4 for 1 every time they played it, and I felt so despaired.
Yeah, you fall so far behind, and like the drawback to something this powerful is that it has 4 black mana symbols in its mana cost. It's very restrictive. Like Wizards, have you seen mana bases in any format lately? Like 4 of any color is not difficult to pull off.
Okay, for the record, this card just got banned in Standard.
Did Invoke Despair get banned? I thought it was
didn't it?
Kiki Chikamiri Breaker got banned, or
and Invoke Despair.
Oh, okay, good. Well, good, because I hated seeing it. Next one. Again,
because it broke too many rules. It made planeswalkers and enchantments hard to play.
Next one. Broke the rules. Made me change my game plan. Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. It's a
classic card. I've played that card a lot, Josh.
I know. It's a 2-drop, which is fine. It's a 2/1, which is fine. It's got First Strike, which makes it a little better than normal. But then it says non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. Like, man, Ben, I've got my whole first 5 turns planned out. And then Thalia comes down and like, well, I guess all that's out the window.
Yeah, my Pioneer deck is what's called Boros Heroic. And what that deck is designed to do is only get up to like maybe 3 lands and then cast like 6 spells in a turn and kill your opponent. But with Thalia out, I can't cast 6 spells in a turn. I'm lucky if I can cast 2.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. It's just, well, they're going to drop a bunch of little creatures that are going to overrun me, and I can't do anything about it because everything's too expensive now.
It's funny. She just increases it by 1, but it's enough, again, to break the rules of the game and make it not work.
Yeah. In Standard, the next set, it's 2 cards, but they're basically 1 card. If my opponent played either a Witch's Oven or a Cauldron Familiar,
you know the other one's in there.
Yeah, this game is going to last an hour because Witch's Oven says you can sacrifice a creature to make a food. And then Cauldron Familiar does 2 things. One, when it dies or when it comes into play one of those, your opponents lose a life and you gain a life. And the other one is you can sacrifice a food to return it to the battlefield from the graveyard. So, I'm going to cook my cat in the oven, and then the food I made with the cat I'm going to sacrifice to bring the cat back. And it's just every turn. Every turn I'm going to bleed you a little bit forever.
Yeah, and gain some life. Or can't potential to gain life. The thing I think is the problem with this combo, and it's both sides from a design perspective, is that it's really difficult to interact with. Even if you have ways to interact with the creature or the graveyard, there's ways to keep the cycle going even if you have interaction. And that's, again, one of the fundamental rules, is if your opponent's doing something, there should be a way to disrupt it.
Right, and because everything happens at instant speed, you have to be very, very careful and of the timing of when you use the removal. And depending on the circumstances, it may not matter if your opponent
if they have
is
2
savvy.
ovens. Yeah.
Yep. I got one more that I didn't put on my list. I remembered it as we were talking. Okay, so this one is arena only. It's an alchemy card, so you've probably never seen it. It's called Rusko Clockmaker. Have you ever even heard of that card?
Never even heard of it.
Okay, it's a blue-black creature. Again, it's a legendary creature, so it's typically a commander, okay? When it comes into play, you fabricate from the ether a copy of a card named Midnight Clock. Do you remember Midnight Clock?
No.
Okay, so it's on its own, it's a good card, but with this card, it's absurd. Whenever this card comes into play, you get a copy of Midnight Clock, which taps for blue, but then every upkeep, your upkeep and your opponent's, it gets an hour counter on it. When it gets to the 12th hour, you sacrifice the clock, and then you shuffle your hand in your graveyard into your library and draw 7 cards.
That sounds like fun.
Except this guy says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an hour counter on each midnight clock that you have. And so when I'm playing against this deck, this whole deck does two things. One, it puts Rusko into play. It flickers him as many times as possible to get like 5 or 6 different clocks, all with different amounts of hour counters on it. And then it counters every spell that I play, because every counter he casts is going to tick up all the clocks, and eventually one of them is going to chime, and he's going to get 7 new counter spells in his hand. And so it's just, I can't do anything. He's always got 7 cards, Ben.
So he's always going to prevent what you're trying to do.
Yeah, it's like, oh, well, typically what you do if you're playing against a deck that's built around counter spells is eventually they'll run out of counters. 1-for-1 trades that way never work out for the person with the counter spells. Eventually you're going to stick something and you'll be able to beat him. But not when they keep refreshing their hand with 7 cards.
So listeners, Josh just came to play Magic, and if you're trying to use a win strategy that prevents him from doing that, he's not going to have a good time.
Listen, it's fine when I stop you from doing your stuff, but when you stop me from doing my stuff, that's not fine. I don't like that.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't talk as someone whose main modern deck for the past 3 years it runs Blood Moon main deck.
Ben, I've seen you get so spiky and so ready to beat your opponent that if they're too slow in conceding, you look like you're visibly shaking, like you want to get up and slap them, like, concede, I've beaten you.
Yeah. Okay, so our second question is, Ben recently confessed to his favorite candy, vanilla Tootsie Rolls. I don't know that I call it my favorite, but I'll definitely agree that I love them, and if I see a candy dish with them in them. Josh, what's your favorite candy?
Okay, so I've discovered in my old age, I don't like questions that start with, what's your favorite? And because anything that comes after that, I feel like there's too many things that I've experienced to try to boil it down to, this is the thing that I want to stick in that slot forever and be defined by, okay?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. But you do have candies you like, right? Let's talk about those.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and so that's the thing. I want to break this out into categories because I was juggling these handful of candies that I really like. I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to pick a favorite. I'm going to say all 3 of them. So if I'm in the mood for chocolate, which is very rare, then I'm going to eat a Twix. It's the only candy bar with the cookie crunch.
Okay, good. Do you care about whether it's the left Twix or the right Twix?
I think
that's a brilliant marketing campaign.
Yeah, I prefer the 2 left Twix if I can get them, but Twix is a Twix, so I'm not too picky that way.
Describe what makes this experience of eating a Twix a good way to consume chocolate.
It's a texture thing for me because it's not just like the chocolate and the caramel, which are good flavors on their own, but typically if it's just chocolate and caramel, it's like just kind of mushy and there's nothing there. But they put that wafer in it and it gives you that satisfying snap and the crunch as you're chewing on it, and it blends as you're chewing it together to not so.
That was
gooey.
Like a Twix commercial. I want one now. Well done.
So you know exactly what I'm talking about. If anybody's ever had a Twix, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't had a Twix, where do you live? Go get a Twix.
All right, what's second on your list?
So sugary. If I just need something sugary, if I just want something to taste good, then I go for Nerds. Those little tiny hard candies, you bite on those. This is, 1, because they're delicious, and 2, a little bit of nostalgia. Because I remember me and my best friend in middle school and high school riding our bikes to the local Walgreens and buying the giant pack of Nerds for like $1.50 and just eating those for the rest of the day. You just rip the top open and dump a handful in at a time and just munch on them.
That's awesome. Have you ever a year later pulled out the couch cushions and found Nerds?
Yep.
Because those things get everywhere.
Yeah, this is why I recommend pouring it directly into your mouth and not into your hand. Like any place other than the orifice that's going to consume the things, they're going to fall out and get everywhere.
Yeah, and they made those boxes with the little sliding tabs so that you could have 2 different flavors in them. Did you ever get those?
Oh, the little boxes. Yeah. So those are little. I would shoot those like you would shoot tequila. Well, not like you would shoot tequila, but I just open the top and take the whole thing at once. No, okay. I'm talking about the big ones, man. Like they're like the size of an old VCR cassette tape. Like those are the ones.
I know what you're talking about. The movie theater size boxes.
Yes, of Nerds. And don't buy movie theater size boxes of Nerds at the movies. That's obnoxious.
So I was kind of hinting at the fundamental problem of Nerds in that they're kind of messy, but they did something brilliant a little while back, and they released something called Nerds Rope. I think that again, I'm imagining execs sitting around a boardroom and some guy in the back of the room raising hands and be like, Nerds are kind of messy. I got an idea. How about we get a long piece of licorice and we stick a whole bunch of nerds to the outside of it so that they're stuck and they can't come off. And have you ever tried one of these?
No, I haven't.
Okay, here's the thing. they started with a really good rope. Like this gummy candy that's in the center of a Nerd's rope is delicious all by itself, but the fact that it's got Nerds stuck all around the outside of it is fantastic, and they almost never fall off, and they're really great. So then that was as if that wasn't a good enough idea. Then somebody said, yeah, but the rope's kind of inconvenient. People don't want that big old thing and try to eat it and whatever. So how about we chop the rope up into little pieces? So now they have these Nerds nuggets. They're like a little piece of gummy candy with Nerds stuck all over the outside of it. I got them while I was watching the Spider-Man movie, and I loved them because they're great.
All right, you know what? I was hesitant, and I've never tried it before, but you've sold me. Next time I go to the movie theater, I'm going to try it. Usually I get red vines at the theater, but I'm going to try the Nerd clusters. All right,
so if you want chocolate, you get Twix, and if you want some sugar, you get Nerds.
Honorable mention. Honorable mention for Starburst jelly beans. I don't know why. I love Starburst, but I found eating them was too, I don't know, obnoxious. You ever had a Starburst and you just have one in your mouth for the next 20 minutes? Like, yeah. I want that hit of good Starburst flavor, but I want it now, and I want it gone, and I want the next one. And that's what the jelly beans are for.
They definitely do that. I got two questions for you. One, the class, they've branched out with Starburst and come out with all kinds of flavors, but really there's only 4 flavors. There's the red one, the pink one, the orange one, and the yellow one. In your family, if there was a bowl of Starburst, would there only be one color left? And if so, what would it be?
Okay, so
what one's gone first?
We've conducted this exact experiment because, during the holidays, we get bags of the Starburst jelly beans. Typically, it's Easter. We end up with way too many bags of these, and the bags of jelly beans come with 6 flavors: red, pink, orange, yellow, green, and purple. It's like apple and grape, I think, are the other 2 colors. Okay. And we poured them all out into a bowl and left them on the kitchen counter for the holiday season, which is until all the candy is gone. And the last 2 colors that were in the bowl was green and purple. Nobody liked the green and the purple ones.
Okay.
But here's the thing that we discovered. That was 2 years ago. This year, we found out you can buy bags of just the red and the pink ones. There's bags of Starburst jelly beans, and it says all red. And you just get the red and the pink ones, and that's all we bought.
Okay. Yeah, that kind of solves the problem. So, but for regular Starburst, which is your favorite?
The pink one.
Okay, and which is the least?
Probably the purple one. I don't like artificial grape flavor. Never have.
Again, you're the male version of my wife. Okay. Completely separate question. Came from one of our Reddit listeners. What is your perfect day?
Go ahead, Ben. You go first.
All right. So recently, and I think this changes throughout my life of what my perfect day is. My wife says I always like to have a little bit of X Games in my life, and when that was younger, that was true. But recently, I've been injuring myself and not healing, and I'm starting to come down to earth. I don't want to, go like snowboarding every day and stuff like that. And I'm kind of calming down a bit. But a couple of days recently, this is what will happen. There are about 3 days in the year where the military will give you a day off that's not also a federal holiday, and your kids are in school, and so I kind of just have the day to myself. I love my kids and I love spending time with them, but there have been a few of those days where those are the days I'm like, man, that was a great day.
Hang on. What do they call those days when you get a non-federal holiday off, Ben?
I refuse to answer the question on the grounds that may incriminate me. Josh, we're both Americans. I plead the Fifth Amendment. Okay.
They're called family down days. And you're talking about the best part of those days is you not being with your family?
No, it just feels like more of a day off that way. Because as you pointed out on the last episode, I'm not like competing with anyone for the TV, or I'm not cooking for other people or those kinds of things.
I'm razzing you, but at the same time, I totally get it. Like you're a good dad. You spend time with your kids, but sometimes you just need some me time.
Yeah. Okay. So here it is. I get up whenever I feel like it. Then I get dressed and go play a round of disc golf. And then I come home and maybe do like an entire league of Magic the Gathering Online Modern. And then I maybe have something delicious to eat and get laid. And that is a great day. That's like my perfect day.
I mean, I think any man over the age of 16 is going to include that in their perfect day. So I don't have a schedule for mine. Like I can't like plan out like between this time and this time, this is what my day was going to look like. But I have common elements. These are the things that would be a part of my perfect day.
Okay.
The first one on my list is fun with my kids. Like I want to go and do something where both the kids are looking at me, smiling and laughing at the same time. Like that's a win. That's a parenting win. I wanted to do games with my friends. And like you're talking about, I wanted some downtime for yourself or whatever, whether that's going to be a Vintage Cube League online with you on the Skype, or if it's going to be sitting down with Paper Magic with people I like. I want to have some game time. At some point during that day, I want to have a beer with my dad and just sit down and talk like men talk with beers, like manly men. That's too much. Dial it back.
I loved it.
The last one is I in the notes put time with my wife, which is not it encompasses getting laid like you talked about, but there's more there. I'd like to do something with her, go see a movie or share some experience and just be together and enjoy the time.
That's great. Yes. And kind of like you said, of picking out your favorite candy, I don't think I could pick out my favorite day. Like, I have great days where I spend the whole day with my wife, or great days where I spend time with my kids. And but just recently, when I stare off into the middle distance and say, that was a great day, that was what had happened.
What's funny is like that kind of question always elicits this thought of the TV shows that you see where it's like somebody knows it's going to be their last day on Earth. Somehow they know that. And so they plan it out.
And then they go do all the things.
They do all the things. And then that always elicits the question in my mind is like, would you want to know? Because it's a double-edged sword. Because on the one hand, you get to prioritize the things that are really important to you. But all of that is going to be overshadowed by the fact that you know that this is it. This is the last bit of it, right? And so could you really immerse yourself fully into it, having that looming over you? But at the same time, if you don't know, you're just going to get sucked into your normal minutia. This is where my brain always like rebels, because if you don't know it's your last day on Earth, you're just going to do your normal routine. You're going to go to work. You're going to, pick up the dry cleaning. You're going to, talk to your kids for 10 or 15 minutes, but you're not going to do anything special. And then this is where I freak out, because like, if this stuff, I admit, is super important to me, why am I not doing that all the time?
Okay, I've got a counterpoint to this.
Okay.
You know what my favorite film is, right? Have I told you what my favorite movie is?
Yeah, it's Groundhog Day. Of course.
Yes,
of course you've
Groundhog Day, starring Bill Murray. So in that one, it's interesting because his life, he kind of effectively become an immortal. So instead of it being, you never know which day is going to be your last, for him it was, there is no last day. And his life was gradually becoming towards always being his best day. He'd, over time, found out the things that gave him the most fulfillment and enjoyment and were the most holistically, actuarial?
Yeah, actualized,
Self-actuating, yes. And then that happened to be what broke him out of his loop. But that last day, the very last day of the movie, was the perfect day.
So here's my counter argument to that. Is I know exactly what you're talking about, and it's a great movie. Go see it if you haven't. But also on that last day when he breaks out the loop, that looks exhausting. Like he's up early and he is just moving on this tight schedule from one thing to the next to make sure everything that he does happens on time. Like he ends up playing piano at a gala, someplace full of people that have never met him before this day. And then not only is he playing piano for the gala, but multiple people stop him during the event
and call him by name.
Call him by name and thank him for his friendship or the service that he provided them. This happened in one day. Like this guy didn't sit down that whole time.
Josh, have you ever known anyone that's an over planner?
But like, no, I'm saying that. That's facetious.
No. I'm whatever it is that you think I am, imagine that times 10. So I've known a few people like this. Like, for instance, let's say you're planning to go to Disneyland. I'll tell this story by proxy. My wife's sister had a friend. She's like, we're planning a trip to Disneyland. She goes, oh, when is it? She said, oh, it's in October. I think that was 6 months out. And she's like, that's not enough time. Can you push it out? Like, to her, 6 months wasn't enough time to plan a trip to Disneyland.
Yeah, if you're going to plan it down to the minute, even then, I feel like that's enough time.
But this lady was the kind of person where that wasn't enough time to plan it out. And I mean it, like a minute-by-minute itinerary of what you're going to do and when. I don't even know what someone like that does when, like, the line you're waiting in takes longer than you expected.
Okay, well, Hank, let's bring this back to the question of what is your perfect day, and let's expand and generalize it just a little bit. If you go on a trip, how much of the trip is planned? Because I know that answer for me, but what's your answer?
I feel like I've come to an old age wisdom position on this, which is I only plan a few things and just let the rest happen, and that's when I'll optimize my enjoyment.
Got it. I've kind of fallen on that same thing. Like the last major trip my wife and I took, we had an idea of what we were going to do each day, but the specifics and the timing we kind of left open, knowing that there's going to be other things to fill the gaps, or we'll find
and
stuff.
you don't know what those are.
Yeah.
How can you plan for them? They haven't happened yet.
There you go. So all you listeners that are over planners, like Ben was talking about, you need to plan in some time for sporadic nonsense to happen.
All right, our next question says, I know people who are able to make it on time to some things like work. However, they're almost always late to other things like family events. To me, when someone is habitually late, it sends a message that they don't respect me or my time. What are some less judgmental reasons people are constantly tardy? I love this question, Josh.
Oh, this question is just farming out the H of G. Like, I need you to explain to me how it's not rude for people to be late to my house when I invite them to dinner.
Yes, and if they haven't listened to the episode where we explain H of G, that's in hermeneutics of generosity. It means trying to understand someone else's position by giving them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, humanics of Germanity is something I can't ever pronounce, so I just say H of G, and you always remember what it is.
So, giving someone the benefit of the doubt maybe is a way to do this, but I think outside the box completely. So before I describe that, how do you approach the answer to this question?
It depends on the event. So if it is a professional event, if I'm going to sit down at a meeting with a client or I'm going to give a presentation or something, any kind of professional setting, people that are late are disrespecting your time. I don't care what their excuse is. Like, I don't like that. And now it changes depending on the circumstances. If I'm presenting to a room full of people and people come in late, I don't care. If I'm here to present to you, one guy, and you don't show up on time with no valid excuse that was uncontrollable on your part, like, oh, sorry, I was late. My tire exploded on the way here. Okay, that's a legitimate excuse. You had no control over that. But if you had control over your entire life and you didn't get here on time, that's on you. That's bad planning, and that's disrespectful to me and my time. Now, all of that said, that's entirely different if we're talking about social settings. If this is just friends or family inviting you over to hang out, the intention here, like the assumption from the get-go, is this is a casual get-together because we enjoy each other's company. Now, I mean, there's something to be said about like, oh yeah, just roll in whenever. Like, we're planning on getting started around 5. And if you come in at like 8 p.m., I mean, that's a little weird. That's a little pushing it, especially if that was going to be your end time for the thing. But if somebody shows, like, I have commonly, somebody invite me over, like, oh, we're going to get going around 2 or 3 o'clock, and I'll show up at like 3:30. And I think that's fine. Like, there's, so...
Yeah, I think that's not what the listener's asking about, though.
Well,
you're right. There's a difference between like a casual social gathering and like a meeting or
well, and
dinner date.
So one of the questions he asked, like, what are some less judgmental reasons people are consistently tardy? Well, I'll give you one. I had to go through official government etiquette training as part of my upbringing at the academy, and one of the things that they said explicitly, thou shalt not show up to any kind of event or social gathering more than 15 minutes late. And
okay,
that's the official word of the government when you show up to like a social gathering, because, and they said, like, a person says they're going to start at a certain time.
You mean early?
Yeah, no more than 15 minutes late. You cannot be there earlier than that. If it starts at 6, it is rude to show up anytime before 6:15.
Huh.
The idea there is that if the event planner has unforeseen things, they're going to need a little time to make sure everything, all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed before people roll into their house expecting stuff to happen. And so it's nice on your part to actually allow them a little bit of flex time before they are required to be the host.
Yeah. Now, built into this question, the listener was kind of saying that this person shows they have the capability to be on time to things, but then they're also late. But then they're late to other kinds of things, and that I think the mistake in the fundamental asking the question and what the listener is looking for is the assumption. So I want to deconstruct the question, and that is, if you assume that timeliness is exactly has a 1-to-1 ratio with respect, then less timely is less respect.
Okay.
One of the 100 training courses I had to take to come over here was a cultural sensitivity course, and there was an entire unit on timeliness, because Americans need to learn this. Because if you look at different cultures around the world, some cultures value timeliness more than others, and Americans are near the top of how much they value timeliness as a show of respect in their culture.
Oh.
Some other cultures do not value timeliness as a show of respect. It's just on a different axis.
Okay. It's like when you say like everything's wishy-washy. When you say show up at 5, they what they hear is late afternoon.
Right. Exactly. And if they're on the way to come see you and they see someone else and they need to stop and talk to them, they don't think if I stop to this person, it's going to make me late. They just think I'm going to see that person. They're important to me. This person is important to me, and they're in my face now, so I'm talking to them. And when they get there, they might not even make an excuse.
So has this requirement for professional timeliness in American culture bled over into the non-professional setting? So now we just are wrongfully assuming the same values and thinking that, like, for my social gatherings, I said 5. People should be here at 5.
Okay, so I got 2 experiences that have already happened to me since I arrived I want to tell. One is this fascinating anecdote I heard. So the United States Central Command just got a brand new 4-star general. It's an Army 4-star, and he came to our base, and so it was a big deal because, you know, when a 4-star comes to base where a colonel's the commander, everybody's got to, you know, put on their best clothes and clean up their work centers and plan it out to the nth degree, everything, and, you know, what drink he likes that you're going to have pre-positioned, where he's going to be sitting, and all those kinds of things, all the protocol stuff. Well, he had a big entourage with him of other people that had maybe never been to our base before, and there was enough of them that they didn't all do the same thing at the same time. But they had an itinerary, and this 4-star with his 3-star and all of their team, and everyone has their own team, ended up split up, and the itinerary said that they were going to depart from his government jet on the runway at a certain time, and when that time came, he took off without his 3-star.
Totally abandoned a low-ranking officer and his staff.
Yeah, a 4-star abandoned a 3-star, and this is the new boss showing that he's boss. Like, you will respect my time. A 4-star doesn't wait for a 3-star. I'm taking off at the moment the itinerary said this plane is leaving.
That's one way to put somebody in their place in the most passive-aggressive kind of catty way ever.
That's the far end of the spectrum. That's me showing you that my time is what you value above anything else. And I think
that's great.
And then at the other end of the spectrum is just like, I don't know, imagine like a Pacific Island kind of thing where it's just like easy going, show up when you can, leave when you feel like it, and nobody cares one way or the other.
It's Paul Rudd in Forgetting Sarah Marshall. It's like, oh man, just, you know, you're doing too much, do less.
So when I got here, one of the things I found out that are my duties, I'm not just the executive officer or the commander, I'm also kind of the focal point for our relationship with the host nation, which in this case happens to be Kuwait. And so I immediately had to meet the Kuwaiti nationals in their liaison office. So I went over there to their office, and they give me a very warm handshake and offer me to sit down, and it was like there were no clocks in the room. He wasn't wearing a watch, and he went and brought us drinks, and he didn't ask how long we had to stay or anything like that. And it was like time just went away, and that's the other end of the spectrum.
Well, that would have been terrible. Like, were you trapped in this room with this meandering, like, let's get to the point guy?
Yes. And I was making a very deliberate effort to just give off the same kind of vibe. Like, I didn't care how much time it took because I wanted to show respect to him in his cultural context.
And you're conforming to his cultural expectations, which then lends itself to a good working relationship, hopefully, blah, blah, blah. Yes,
but I did refuse the coffee that he offered me because it's against my religion.
Wow. You could possibly be responsible for a cultural incident because of your religious beliefs. How do you feel about that, Ben? You're not going to bend at all for the name of the U.S. government, sir?
All right, Josh, let's pretend that in this scenario that we're asking about timeliness, let's pretend it's like a close family member. Like, anytime you have a gathering with your family, let's say you're having a dinner with your family, everybody's supposed to bring something, and one of your family members is late, and like they didn't bring the paper plates. And so everyone's sitting around trying to eat, but there's no paper plates.
Okay, so I don't have to imagine this scenario. I can pull from a dozen that have actually happened. So my brother, who is a wonderful person, love him to death, but he is not timely to save his life. I told a story many, many episodes back where he was 15 minutes early to something that I was going to meet him at and still ended up being 10 minutes late.
Yes, you. I remember that story. But does he also have this capacity to be on time when it matters?
I don't know. I don't know if he's ever been on time. Like, I think it's so rare that people just, like, honestly, like, you talk to any of my family members, whatever time the thing is going to start, we all deliberately communicate to him a time that is earlier in order to try to get him to show up on time.
Yeah, it's like setting your clock ahead. I think when you have someone that shows the capacity to be on time when they want to, but then when they don't, rather than take it as a sign of respect, take it as a sign of comfort, that they feel comfortable enough to let their guard out, and maybe, they have personal reasons that they're not on time to things, but it isn't an intent to show disrespect.
Well, and that's the thing. And that's the story. Like, I don't hate my brother because he's late to everything. I understand that he's just, Alex, I love you to death, buddy, but you just cannot plan your time. Like, this guy, I've heard him say stuff like, oh, what time do we have to be there? 30 minutes? Oh yeah, I could totally knock out a 1.5 mile run. And just, like, go for a run before he needs to be someplace. I'm like, my man, you've got to plan a little slack in your like, trying to compact events into your timeline.
So I like the example that you gave for why, because that kind of thing is time consuming, but he's also probably has what I have, is this aversion to sitting around and waiting because it's boring and it's a waste of time. So He wants to try to utilize all this slack, and then if something goes wrong or changes or takes longer than you expected, then it bleeds into the timeliness.
I can confidently say that my brother's the type of person that if he's going to bed, if he's looking at his calendar of what he did that day, and he goes, there was 0 slack in this day, that is a good day. And then he goes to sleep happy.
Nice. All right, our next question says, advice for collecting cards you need to make a good Magic deck.
Okay,
Not
that was
interested in buying singles.
That was me paraphrasing Tweedlebeetles. Like, he put a very elegant paragraph in the Reddit. He is interested in, like, getting into paper Magic more and, like, having, like, cards to build decks that he's interested in with, but he's not interested in buying singles. He wants to know the best way to accumulate a Magic the Gathering collection to a point where he can, I guess, semi-easily switch between decks or make a new deck when stuff happens.
Okay, so to me those sound like mutually exclusive goals. Like, I don't know how you can get into competitive constructed Magic without buying singles.
I do.
The amount of cards you'd have to buy is virtually impossible.
And therein lies the rub. So here's the thing. I did this. I said earlier that I was averse to buying singles. I didn't want to do that. I thought the way to play Magic was to open Magic product. Okay. So right. Then when I was playing competitive Standard, when you met me, when I taught you Magic, the way that I got cards was I would buy packs of cards. And it got to the point where I wouldn't buy a pack of cards. I would go to the counter and be like, oh, do you have the new set? They would go, yes. And I said, great, give me 2 boxes. And a box at the time being 36 packs. And so I'd be spending upwards of $500 buying ludicrous amounts of Magic cards every other month. And that's the wrong way to do it. Don't do it that way. Don't throw all of your disposable income at just buying random product.
Okay, so what advice do we give our poor listener who gave us an unsolvable scenario?
Okay, so my advice, for me personally, is you need to change your way of thought. Go watch every single video that the professor, Brian, at the Tolarian Community College has ever posted online. His thesis across all of them is just buy singles. Don't buy packs if you want specific cards, because you won't get them. You will throw money at this company for no reason. But if you are dead set, I don't want to buy singles, that's not fun to me, my recommendation then is to get as much value out of the packs that you're buying. And the way to do that is find an LGS that does consistent, regular drafts. I think if you want to accumulate a large amount of Magic cards and have some tiny control over which ones you're getting, I think drafting is the best way to do it. That way, you're paying an entry fee.
I still don't think you'll accumulate a constructed deck, but I think learning to love limited Magic is probably the answer.
Yeah, and like if you love just to draft, like then accumulating this cardboard on the side becomes a fringe benefit. Like if you're enjoying the experience of just drafting, and also slowly over time, I will eventually have enough of a collection to actually put together a deck or something. And that's the other thing is get really good at deck building restrictions. Like if you want to build a deck, like if you do it on paper first and then look to see if you have the cards, you're going to have a bad time. Make decks from what you have.
Okay, here's one other piece of advice. This one's kind of obvious because it's in the name. It's a trading card game. You know, if you accumulate some cards, you could probably find someone that has what you need and you have what they need and you trade.
That's a whole secondary market built around this thing that if you don't want to spend money, spend the
That's
cards.
not buying singles, just trade.
Yeah, but seriously, Tweedlebeals, buy singles. Like, you'll be happier.
Yeah.
Actually, yes.
That's what I think. It's like a half step. You can learn to like limited Magic, but if you really want to play a good constructed deck, there's no way to get around buying singles.
Or don't play constructed or competitive Magic. Go immediately into an Eternal format like Modern or Commander or Oathbreaker now, and just get a deck, pay for it, and it'll never change. And like, this is my one deck.
I've been playing the same Modern deck for like 2.5 years now. Barely change it.
It's a solid deck.
Our next question says, Ben, you'll be in Kuwait when this comes out. Can you describe the heat? All right. First of all, listener, I'd like to tell you something that that you may not know, a new fact, and that is if you ever say, wow, it's really hot out, someone from Phoenix will materialize out of thin air and say, you think heat, you know heat, you don't know anything about heat.
Oh, Ben, yeah, you got me. So in the show notes, Ben actually typed literally like opening a hot oven, and I could not stop myself. Like we hadn't spoken up until this point, but I typed in the show notes after that, like, that's every day in Arizona, bro.
Okay, it's dark outside. Let me see how hot it is. It is 106 degrees outside.
Yeah. Yes, Ben. And in summer in Arizona, it's that at 5 in the morning. Like,
okay, in order to contextualize this, because I don't want to... It is hotter in Kuwait than Phoenix. On an average day, on an annual day, but not by much. So it's negligible, I'd say.
Well, it's also very humid there, which changes it to be even more miserable. I get that too. I will. Anybody that's not experienced heat, like, I'm taking over your heat episode. I'm talking about heat.
Yes, of course.
Anybody that's not experienced heat, like, if past 100 degrees into the triple digits, you know when it's triple digits because the air is hot. That's the whole, when you feel like you're opening an oven in this whoosh of hot air. Like, walking outside feels like that all the time. And then past 110 degrees, that's when it's not even nice in the shade. Like, you're in the shade and you're still sweating like a horse. Okay, I promise I'm done. Go ahead, Ben. Tell us about the heat in Kuwait.
When it's that hot for that long, every consideration you have is access to air conditioning. Like, if it's not if I don't have air conditioning, what do I need to do? It's if I don't have air conditioning, how do I get it back? Like, that's the only... It's the only consideration you have. So right now in my life, I walk from one air-conditioned place to another, and that's it.
Are you drinking more? You need to be drinking way more water than you used to, probably.
Yeah. Well, but I don't work outside, Josh.
That doesn't matter. What if you get stuck out there? You're the exec, man. He's going to tell you, hey, I want you to go outside in the airfield and wait until the 4-star shows up again. Like, you need to be hydrated.
So the next question is, there's something unexpected that you don't have to worry about in a cooler climate? Yeah, there's weird things. Like, for instance, there's the... on the building that I work in, you have to put in a code on a door that's like buttons you push. And there's one side of the building that's in the sun all day long. And at some point during the day, it's so hot that you can't touch the buttons anymore without burning yourself. So that exit becomes inaccessible.
That's awesome. Like, you don't have a pen? You can't push the buttons with a pen? Is it?
No, it's a cipher lock in there. Kind of like
the
travel on them requires a lot of force.
Gotcha. It's one of those. It's a spinny lock.
Yeah, but you can't do it without burning yourself. So I need to carry like asbestos glove in my pocket or something.
That's a terrible example and dates you poorly.
Yeah, there's so much. I'll probably have more as I've been here longer. But I've been in the desert before when it's really hot. I always come to places like this and I look around at just the barren landscape and the brutal heat and think, why did people coming through this part of the world ever stop and stay here and be like, yeah, this is fun? It's like the dog in that internet meme where everything around him's on fire and he's saying, this is fine. Like, no, it's not. Get out. Go somewhere else.
These are just some hardier people than you, man.
There are places with vegetation and flowing water. Like, go somewhere else.
Well, I'm going to challenge you. Why is where you are a thing in the first place? Why did people ever settle there, Ben? Like, this is a history question for you that sounds right up your alley.
Yeah, I've pondered it a lot. in the Book of Mormon, which I'm reading right now, the peoples left from Jerusalem about 600 years BC, and it was about the time they were going to be invaded by the Babylonian Empire. So, they had to kind of cross the desert and come this direction to escape invading armies. So that's one reason to come here. But why to stay? I don't know. Even in their account, they talk about it as the wilderness, and they talk about murmuring because of being here. Like, they didn't like it. They didn't want to stay.
I'm gonna give you an answer that you're not gonna like, and it's socioeconomics. Okay, this is just like when Hurricane Katrina happened and wiped out all of the Gulf Coast, and people around the rest of the country are asking, well, why do you even live there? It's your own fault, and victim blaming up and down for, like, why would you choose to stay in a place that's going to get riddled by hurricane destruction? And a lot of times the answer is because they literally can't afford to move their life anywhere else.
I feel like that is less and less of an excuse, maybe more than any time that it's ever been. I remember when I was a kid and I learned about Eskimos that lived in houses made of ice and ate whale blubber. And I thought, can't they just walk a little bit farther south? Like,
but what would they do? Their generations.
There's other forces keeping there.
Well, their generations of whale hunting experience would go to waste if they went south and started having to hunt elk instead. They're starting over from scratch. It's the idea of the known bad versus the unknown bad, which is always going to be way worse because you can only ever fill that gap with the worst imaginable possibilities.
Which would you argue, evolutionary, are humans better suited for warm climates or cold climates?
We are better suited for warm climates because we're warm-blooded.
I would think so,
we
too.
expend energy to stay warm.
Not only that, but I think of all the species, we have some of the most effective mechanisms for coping with heat.
You're talking about air conditioning or sweat glands, like biologically or technologically?
Sweat glands, lack of hair, those kinds of things.
Here's the real answer, man, is we have exceeded biology's requirements for where we live. We can make anywhere we want to be livable.
We can live wherever we want. Yeah.
So why shouldn't we? Manifest destiny. Let's go terraform Venus.
Our next question is, what's a detail of the local culture you wouldn't notice from news reports and like? I love this question. I think about this everywhere I go. Every time I go somewhere, I'm constantly looking for the answer to this question. So thank you to our listener that asked it. I remember when I was in Italy and the first time I went to a church potluck, I was fascinated by the kinds of dishes that people brought from home. Because if you think about American food, you think about like hot dogs and hamburgers and pizza and stuff like that. But if you go to like an American potluck, then what are you going to eat? You're going to get like casseroles and mac and cheese and those kinds of things. And when I got to Italy, there was an equivalent of that. Like the first time I went to an Italian potluck, I got to see what Italians ate in their homes, not what they serve in their restaurants.
Ooh, okay.
So I haven't had time to experience that here. I'll be on the lookout for it. But I did have an experience on the way here that was fascinating. So geographically, the country of Ireland kind of enjoys the distinction of being closest to the United States when you're crossing the Atlantic from the northeast. And so there's an airport in Western Ireland that's kind of set itself up to be a bit of a hub. I've stopped there several times on military travel where they fly across the Atlantic, they stop at this airport, refuel, change air crews, refill their catering, and take off again for their destination in the Middle East or whatever. And the airport is called Shannon Airport. I think it's near Limerick, Ireland. Anyway, what they'll do is bring the servicemen in, not officially immigrate us into the country, but allow us access to like their stores. So like a lot of the soldier guys went and we were there at like 8 a.m, but there were guys that were like double fisting Guinness.
Yep. That's what you do. That's right.
Anyway, down one of the hallways, since I wasn't drinking, was this fascinating little display that kind of attracted my attention. It was the Shannon Airport Aviation Gallery. Apparently, some old guy had spent his whole life collecting die-cast models of aircraft, and he'd gotten so much, and he got someone's attention, and basically they dedicated this little wing to him in the airport where he just set out all of his collection of die-cast aircraft. And someone like that loves to see someone in an Air Force uniform, and there was this old hunched over man with gray hair and wrinkled skin that was polishing the glass on these display cases when I walked in to look at this aviation gallery. And he had the most delightful Irish accent, and I asked him a million questions, and he's the guy that curates the gallery and owns all the aircraft, and it was a lovely experience. That was fantastic.
Man, two things about that. One, you are the weirdest guy, because you were the only person in there at that time. I guarantee it. And two, this just goes to show, like, pick a thing. It doesn't matter how random or crazy it is. There is a person who has dedicated their whole life to that thing.
Yeah, it was amazing. And every question I asked him, he had the answers. I loved it. If you're ever in Ireland, go to the Shannon Airport Aviation Gallery and see Mike Kelly. Maybe he'll still be there.
Good for Mike Kelly.
All right, our next question says, what are the logistics of you two doing the podcast while Ben is in the Middle East, tech-wise and scheduling-wise? We're finding that out right now.
Yeah, we're working on it. So the biggest thing was the time difference. Like, well, there's a couple of things. First, we had to work out the issues with the recording. A little peek behind the curtain, listeners. Ben and I aren't in the same room right now. Like, if it sounds that way, then we're doing our jobs right. But what we do is we get on a video call and we use our crap microphones to talk to each other, while we use our very high quality microphones to record just our half of the conversation. And then through editing wizardry, we splice those two audio files together and you get a seamless high quality conversation between two very nice gentlemen.
Separated by vast geographic distances, even more so now. Neither of us really knew what to expect when we got here, so we did a test call earlier in the week to see what the latency was, and it was virtually indistinguishable. So we had this little discussion about physics and the speed of light and that kind of thing. But technologically, the slowest thing that happens in sending a signal from Phoenix to the Middle East is it transitioning through a waypoint where a machine has to process the signal and retransmit it. So theoretically, there could be the same number of waypoints when I'm in Louisiana as there is when I'm over here.
Honestly, Ben, having this conversation with you on the literal other side of the earth, it's indistinguishable for me as far as the video call goes. Like, there's no real
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it is. Like, I thought we were going to have severe lag issues. I thought we were going to have to institute some kind of visual signal to take turns talking, but no, it just feels normal.
It wasn't even that long ago, like in 1990 when my dad deployed to the Middle East during the first Gulf War. And I remember we talked to him on the phone maybe twice, and it was on copper phone lines. And there was literally like a 4-second delay. So you'd ask a question, wait 4 seconds, and then hear the answer.
Yeah, when I was in Afghanistan, the only internet I had access to was satellite. And it was like that. It was virtually unusable for video calls because of that reason.
And you had to wait in line for like four phones,
yeah.
And that was all you could use. And now it's like everywhere on camp, there's ubiquitous Wi-Fi with full speed video at near real time to the other side of the earth. What a great time we live in.
The world's getting smaller and smaller as technology gets better and better. Now, the other major problem we're having is the time difference, because you are 10 hours ahead of me. And so working out when we could normally fit the podcast into our schedule was a little wonky. And I'll say the biggest problem for me is you're recording on your Saturday night, and I had to get up early on Saturday to come out and record.
Yeah, thanks for doing that.
Yeah, it's been tough to pound 3 beers at 7 a.m. on a Saturday, but I mean, I got to do it for the podcast.
The sacrifices we make.
I'm not okay. Hang on. Somebody's going to take me way too seriously. I am not an alcoholic. I am not drinking beer. But that's kind of the, like, I always do during the podcast, so why would this be any different? The difference is it's 7 a.m. I'm not drinking beer right now.
There's a fascinating little psychology thing, Josh. You some jokes you're willing to commit to the bit, but for some reason that particular one you aren't. I'm interested to know that.
There's too much negative associated.
Just let them think that.
Just let them think I'm a functional alcoholic. No, that's terrible. No, thank you. I have a better self-image than that.
All right, so there's a couple of questions we saved towards the end, and I think these are appropriate for our 100th episode. It's kind of like, all right, so the first one is, what are some things about podcasting that you didn't know going into it? I'd listened to a bunch of podcasts going into it, and I kind of had an idea. On the surface, it just seems like there's a couple guys talking, they record it, and they put it on the internet, and people listen to it. I had no idea how much work it was going to be. Like, it's a considerable amount of work. Probably for every hour of podcasting we put out, there's probably 2 hours offline of work that goes into it.
Yeah, there is some work that goes into it. Like, I think you do a lot more of the editing work, and I do the hosting work. So there is some back end things that I have to do to make sure that the podcast goes up and that the RSS feed works and the certificates and things. But yeah, it really amounts to just like a couple of hours outside of actually recording with you to get everything up and going.
Yeah, I feel okay. So you know how sometimes in like a friendship or a relationship, you subdivide things, and then like if you lost the other person, you wouldn't know how to do it. Like some of the things my wife and I do. I feel like that in this. Like if you went away, I would not be able to publish this podcast. There's a lot of stuff and I've asked you to kind of like write it down in our notes so that I have it, but I don't, and I wouldn't even know where to start. And
Okay.
I feel like. Yeah, I feel like of the two of us, which one of us knows more about it is you. Like if I feel like my job's easy and you could do it if you tried, but your job I have no idea what you're doing and I wouldn't be able to do it without you.
Dude, what's really funny is this is the same complaint my wife has with me. So in a lot of ways, you're now being the male version of my wife because a lot of the accounts that are set up, like the online accounts to log in and like get access to things and the family accounts, all of that is one, they're under my login name, and two, most of the passwords now are just saved on my profile. So if I was hit by a bus, not only would she not have the passwords, but there's like no way I could write them down because they're, 20 characters of nonsense and they're different for each website. So I will write down the procedures for posting, Ben, I promise.
All right. That wasn't the point I was going to make. I'm just saying it's a lot of work and we do it as a team. Another thing I didn't know about podcasting when I started off doing it is how much I'd enjoy it. It's weird that it's become kind of its own hobby. In this, you and I are talking about games, life, and other things, as you documented at the beginning. But we're also, it's its own kind of hobby. Like we're creating something together. Like we were like building something that I didn't know existed. It's a new 21st century kind of thing.
What I kind of enjoy sometimes is we'll give ourselves homework. Like we'll commit to doing a book review or reviewing a TV show or a movie or some kind of popular media. And that kind of forces us to sit down and then consume that media with the perspective of, okay, I need to fabricate 45 minutes of discussion about the thing that I am watching, which sounds bad, but we get to pick the topics. So it's like,
right. It's like school homework deadlines, but fun, and you picked it.
Yeah, it's like homework on the stuff that I want to do homework on, and so I feel more engaged, and it's more entertaining that way.
Yeah, I like that.
One minor problem that I have that I was noticing this, like I notice it every time, is I need something to do with my hands while we're recording because I have too much energy just sitting here and talking to you, having a conversation. So I need to be physically doing something. Normally, if you and I were having a conversation, I would be moving all over the place. I'd be leaning back, leaning forward, doing stuff with my hands, playing with stuff on the table. But I can't.
You got to
sit
sit there and be near the microphone.
I've got to be this far from the microphone the whole time,
and you can't be making noise.
And I can't be making noise, and so I'm always struggle. I try to find things that I can mess with quietly. But if listeners, if you hear clicks or things that happen randomly in the audio, that's probably me messing with stuff.
Probably Josh drinking Dr. Pepper.
There you go.
What are the values of the Bad at Magic podcast, and why does it work?
Why does Bad at Magic work?
Yeah.
Why does I think Bad at Magic works specifically because of our chemistry. Because you're a great straight guy, and I don't take you seriously enough. Like, that's my off the cuff answer.
Yeah. I also think there are some values that we have in common that are the core of the show, like curiosity. You and I are both curious about the world around us, why people do things, why things happen, why technology works a certain way, what the geopolitical forces are, why our games work, why movies are interesting, and we just explore it together.
I think respect is another one that we can talk about because we have, anybody that's listened long enough, we're great friends, but we have wildly different ideas on a lot of very fundamental things in existence. I don't think we align politically. I don't think we align spiritually. I don't think we align on like family values. There's a lot of places that we differ, but we respect each other enough to just gloss over that and enjoy the other person's perspective, I guess.
I love that you pointed that out. I think that's one of the great things that this show models is that two people who are different can still have a respectful discussion even when they don't agree.
Yeah, and I can still like you as a person even if I don't think you're right on a lot of things.
Yeah. I think one of the other values of the podcast is critical thinking. We engage in it constantly. We're examining our favorite books and movies and games and things that are happening in our own life, our parenting, our husbanding, our relationships, and life, as you said, probably our biggest topic, where we're just looking at it with our critical thinking hats on and figuring out how things work.
Yeah. And that's actually a good thing that people should do more, that I should do more. Every self-help book you ever read, every book about organizing and making your life better and like driving change that's meaningful for yourself, they'll always talk about you need to think about the decisions that you've made, reflect on them, and then think about how you would like to change or what you can do to affect the differences that you want in the future. And honestly, the podcast gives us an excuse to kind of do that. If nothing else, whenever we have random events happen where I didn't wait or I didn't drive around the building at the drive-thru, just getting the other person's perspective on that makes you reflect on your own decisions.
Yeah. I think the last one is a sense of adventure. Maybe this one's exclusive to me, but...
Maybe. Yeah, because I've never recorded the podcast from anywhere but like this room and this desk that I'm sitting at.
That's funny. I wonder how many times I've recorded from somewhere other than my home at my desk. It's been a lot, maybe 20% of the time.
It's quite a bit. Yeah, your parents' closet, like I can identify that on site now, which is a little weird. There was that whole stretch you were in Florida. Now you're in undisclosed locations from wherever. Like, yeah. You're just globetrotting out there, man.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll share more of that with you as we go on. There's a couple housekeeping items I want to do as we're here at the end, Josh, and that is, I think next time I'd like to talk about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. So listeners, as you're hearing this, it's probably still in theaters. Highly recommend you go see it because we're going to talk all about it next time. And I don't want to do a spoiler-free review. I just don't. I want to talk too much about the things that are in it.
Yeah, and let me tack onto that because this is the strongest spoiler warning I think we've ever given because we're giving it an episode in advance of the actual spoiler. But
yeah.
I saw the movie and I texted you these exact words. I am so glad I wasn't spoiled on this movie before I saw it.
Yeah, and I felt a sense of relief inside because I'd seen it in advance and I'd sent you like maybe 3 text messages about it and it stopped and I tried to even avoid it. All I told you is I really loved it.
Yes, like this movie, Ben and I are itching. Like we had a full-up debate on whether or not we should talk about it on this episode because we both want to talk about it so much. At the same time, it is so important. Like it will significantly impact your viewing experience if you know anything about it before going into it. So the strongest possible spoiler warning for next episode.
Yeah. Okay. The other thing I want to mention is I think we can use this platform in a constructive way sometimes even though we've never actually had a paid sponsor. But I listened to another podcast this week that I want to call it by name because it's by a friend of mine. It's called Stuff with Moms. It's just came out. The hosts are Emmeline and Kindy, and it's great. If you like this, maybe you'll like that. Check it out.
Oh, are we getting a cross promotional thing? Are they gonna? Are they going to plug our podcast on their podcast?
They already have.
Oh, well then in that case, please go listen to, what is it, Hosts with Moms?
Stuff with Moms.
Stuff with Moms. Go listen to Stuff with Moms. If they're talking about us, then we have to talk about them too. That's only polite.
Yeah. And if you heard something you like on this episode and you want to engage in the discussion, check out the show notes, go to our Facebook page or go to our subreddit, links in the show notes, and join in the discussion. We want to hear what you have to say.
If you like what we do, consider sharing us with a friend. If you like us, maybe your friends will like us too. If you really want to show us some love, consider taking your phone out of your pocket and giving us a good review on the podcast player of your choice. It's crazy the visibility we get on that. And listeners, if you want Ben to be able to afford the plane ticket home from where he is now, please consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page.
And until next time, try to be a little less bad at magic.